So with that, let's give Bryan a big hand, and let's bring him up here to the Bryan?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Yes, I'm Bryan Caforio, running for Congress here in the 25th District. And really just wanted to take a minute, briefly introduce myself to those of you who don't know me already, tell you a little bit about where I stand on some issues, and then want to spend the majority of the time just answering your questions, finding out what matters most to you and going from there. So I'm born and raised in Southern California. Both of my parents were public school teachers. I went to public schools my whole life, up through UCLA, where I met my amazing wife, Lisa, who's here today, on the UCLA mock trial team, which is really where all great love stories begin. And it all kind of went from there, but a lot of people, they ask me, where do you get, what's your guiding principle? Because you can't know everything that, every vote I'm going to take in advance. You can't know that. But what I can do is share with you my guiding principles and what I'll use with me when I go and decide on each piece of legislation that comes before me. And a lot of that for me comes from my grandpa. And he was a pastor in the 1930s, 1940s in Selma, California. And World War II broke out, and he had a Japanese family in his congregation. And they were slated to be taken away to an internment camp. And he fought against that, and he wrote letters against that, and he spoke out against that, and he tried to stop it, and it didn't work. And they were taken away to the internment camp in Salinas, California. And so on the weekends, he would go to Salinas and lead them in Bible study. And he was run out of his church for doing it, because he was far too progressive for the church at that time. But for him, his overarching guiding principle was to follow the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And so for him, it was a very, very simple thing. This family were members of his community, members of his church, and he needed to be there for them as he would want people to be there for him. And that's how I've tried to live my life. It was passed down to my mom, it was passed down to my sister and me. And so that's why when I was in high school, I tutored other kids who were struggling to get by. It's why, both in high school and college. I then went to law school at Yale Law School. And it's why when I was in law school, I participated in the landlord-tenant clinic and represented people, mainly immigrants, who were dealing with unscrupulous landlords who were trying to shut off the heat or get them evicted in the middle of a freezing Connecticut winter. It's why when I went and clerked on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and almost half the cases you get there are immigration cases or criminal sentencing cases, and just really spent a lot of time focusing on how broken those systems are and how it really, really harms so many families in our communities and across this country. And it's why when I came back and started to practice law in Southern California, it's 2008, 2009, the financial collapse just happened. Foreclosures are going out of control. And I spent my time suing banks and suing insurance companies and suing corporations who were just flat out screwing people. Because they saw that they could steal from people, they could take advantage of people, and they collapsed the world economic market doing it. And I got sick of that and said, that's not who we are. That's not what we should be doing as a country. That's not looking out for your neighbor, not following the golden rule. And so I'm running for Congress now because I think we need to have elected officials who remember what it means to look out for your neighbor, to fight for your community, not to give a $1 trillion handout while taking away people's health care, not to, try to break families apart and kick them out of this country when they're vital members of our community, not to raise our taxes here in California if you own a house or you pay to the state so that they can give the biggest banks, the wealthiest corporations more money that they don't need, but to really start focusing and investing on our community and on working families and on the people right here, to make sure that we have good schools so that every single kid has the same opportunity that my wife Lisa and I had by going to good public schools, which gave us an opportunity to get ahead, which far too many kids today aren't getting. Because I really, really firmly believe that we are our brother's keeper, and that it is up to us to work together, to find solutions that don't just benefit that very small sliver at the top, but that will actually help the vast majority of us together. And I spent a lot of time in this campaign, traveling all across the district, and I really appreciate the Moose for giving this facility and for CCAC for hosting events like this, to give us the opportunity to talk to people. And it's while traveling through this district that I just hear so many stories from people that give me energy and remind me why we're doing this. And so there's the gentleman in Lake Los Angeles who's a friend to Lisa and me, and he doesn't have any legs, he can barely use his hands, and he's totally dependent on Medicaid providing a shuttle that's able to drive him around through the community. And he sits there and looks at these votes that Steve Knight and the people in Congress right now take to slash that Medicaid and take that away, and he sits there and trembles because he is so terrified that he's going to lose his only livelihood, his only ability to be in society, so that a big bank can give a bigger bonus to a multi-millionaire CEO. And I think that's wrong, and it keeps me going. Or I talked to the family in Aliso Canyon, which is in this district, that had the big giant gas leak, if you followed it, and let out untold amounts of methane gas, which was terrible for climate change, but it also caused 20,000 people in our community to be relocated because they were getting sick, their animals were getting sick, and they talked to me, and they're crying because their 7-year-old son is still sick today while they reopen that facility. And Steve Knight goes and testifies in favor of opening it and continuing to bring these poisonous gases to our community. Or the high school young woman who volunteers and interns on our campaign, who is an American citizen but her parents aren't, and she's scared every single day she goes to sleep that when she wakes up her family's not going to be there because they've been torn apart. And I just think that's wrong. And I think we need to stand together, strengthen our community, fight for ways that is going to look out for all of us, and not just those wealthy few at the top. And so that's the message I'm trying to bring. I think we're misguided in a lot of ways in Washington, and I'm really excited about what's going to happen over the next 10 months of this election while we get to talk about these issues more. But I'm most excited about what happens after that election, about the years that follow, when we continue to work together, when I continue to have these town halls and we continue to have an open door policy, really talking about the issues that are going to move this community forward. Because it's not get in there and just operate on your own. It's get in there and work together to find solutions that are really going to benefit everybody here. And so I appreciate all of you coming out for the first meeting in 2018, being a part of our process, being a part of this great community. And I'm excited to answer any questions that you have tonight.
Bryan, Randy Bunyan, tax attorney, University of Michigan Law School.
Wonderful.
It seems every year now we have a crisis where the United States reaches a so-called debt limit, ceiling, that requires an act of Congress signed by the President in order to raise the amount of money, raise the amounts that the United States can use to pay its debts. These are debts that are already obligated. They're already existing. Congress has already authorized the legislation. They're existing. There's no doubt about the fact that the United States owes this money. And yet we have to go through this every year, and it causes this seemingly artificial crisis. Isn't it time that we abolished this requirement so that there's no longer any risk of the United States defaulting on its debt?
Well, thank you for the question. Just to start, my wife's mom went to Michigan for undergrad, and so we spent a lot of time rooting for the Wolverines. We were sad when we were there for Thanksgiving that it didn't go well against Ohio State, but we root for Big Blue when they're not playing UCLA. We root for Big Blue. Yeah, look, we can't let, I believe we can't let the United States default on its debt. Right now, so much of the world economy is based on the full faith and credit of the United States and a complete belief by not just people in the United States but in the world that we are going to be there to pay the obligations that we have already made. And so there are a variety of ways to make sure we never default on that. I don't think we ever should default on that. And whether it's putting a permanent solution in place, whether it's getting common sense people in office who aren't going to hold up the entire world economy so they can get a pet project in there, or take something away from some group. I think we need to find that solution. I agree with you. Yeah. The long walk to the front.
I'm ready. I'm scared by the car. My name is Anne-Marie Wallet, and I was not born here. I came legally here. Difficult, but legally. And I would like to know, if I was a politician, right now I would vote with my heart, not from the party, and by what I know the most, which means I will study the problem, I will read from A to Z a bill, and I will make sure that I am broadly informed, and I have the pour and the contre, the balance. And I really wish that I could find this kind of people in the government. Are you one of them?
Well, thank you for that question. I certainly think I am. The reason I'm running, I'm not a politician. I've never been in elected office. What I see is a complete breakdown in Washington. I see our elected officials failing us. I see them not looking at issues on both sides, not trying to find solutions, not trying to find what's best for a community and a country, but catering to a very small group of special interests who pay a whole lot of money in lobbying fees and in donations that really corrupts our system. I think that's terrible, and it's why I'm running to change that. And that's why I started out at the beginning to tell you what my guiding principle is, and it's following that golden rule, and it's trying to do unto others as I would have others do unto me, because that's the framework I go in, not as a Democrat, not as a Republican, but how can we have the best community? How can we have the strongest country? And what is the solution that's going to be best for the most people? And that's what I really want to get to when I'm in office, and it's what I'll be focusing on.
So it will not be or for Republican or for Democrat, but for the good of the people.
Correct. That's got to be the goal of anybody in office.
I heard you.
Good.
Hello, Bryan. My name is Diane Troutman, and my question for you is, how do you propose to reach out to build community in our district when we have a current Congress member who is locking us out, not listening to us, giving us non-response responses? How do you plan on regularly participating and pulling us into the process with you?
Yeah, thank you. And it's been one of the great disappointments of watching what has happened with our current representative. I've been at many of the protests or demonstrations outside of Congressman Knight's office, and yeah, when people show up, a group of nonviolent people, they literally lock the door, pull down the blinds, and call the sheriffs, and won't talk to people, and we'll get inside of it. People will have a stack of petitions from our constituents, our neighbors, saying, don't kick me off my health care. This is what's keeping me alive. Don't take this away from me. Please accept these petitions. And they say, no, we won't accept them. And that's a real problem. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have an open door policy. We're going to have, an office in all three valleys of this district. It's the Antelope Valley, it's the Santa Clarita Valley, it's Simi Valley. We're going to have an open door policy. I want to talk to people as much as possible. I'm going to be back here at CCAC when I'm in office, answering your questions. I'm going to have regular town halls. I want to make sure we're having a town hall at least every other month, rotating throughout the district to all three valleys. So you don't have to drive up to Palmdale at 8 in the morning for your only chance to talk to me, or you don't have to go to Simi Valley at 5 p.m. on a work day as the only time to talk to me. We're going to be having regular town halls. We're going to have a responsive staff because that's how we do this. You don't do it going away and forgetting about people and claiming you know best, or lying in the newspaper and then voting a different way. You do it by working together, having an open door, and really talking about solutions that'll help people.
Good evening. Doug Fraser. Okay, it's not a national issue, but the state issue of the bullet train. Can you explain where you stand on that and your opinion?
Yeah, thank you, Doug. This district is a real commuting district. From the Antelope Valley, from Simi, from here in Santa Clarita, a lot of people go down below and spend far too long in their cars, and so it's very clear to me we need to have solutions that are going to cut down on that commute time, that are going to make this a whole lot better. It's also clear, I mean, if you read the paper today, there was a story that just came out about more cost overruns with this current bullet train and what's going wrong with that. And I don't support a solution. The most recent proposal that came out, even if it got this far, it wouldn't be getting down to help us out at best for another 10 years. But we don't have 10 years. My wife Lisa takes the Metro Link downtown every day for work. I drive down to LA every day for work. I don't want to wait 10 years for a solution. I want to make sure that we get in there and this great infrastructure spending bill that everybody has been talking about on the campaign trail of both parties, saying a $1 trillion, a $2 trillion infrastructure bill. Well, I want to make sure we get that through. I think we should have done that instead of giving $1.5 trillion to big banks and corporations. We should have put it in infrastructure. Today happens to be the 24th anniversary of the Northridge earthquake, where we had the 14 overpass collapse right there. And it's a real good reminder of how important it is that we can't let our infrastructure crumble the way it is. Let's get in there and spend money now. That's shovel-ready jobs. It's great for the environment. It's great for the economy, and it's going to improve everybody's lives. That's what I want to focus on day one, and not waiting 10 years for something that's happening up in Sacramento to maybe get down here and maybe make a difference.
Hi, my name is Howard Weisberger. You'd mentioned casually about immigration and so on. I'm thinking back to the time of when Ronald Reagan was president, and I believe we gave citizenship to about 11 million people at that time. Now there's the numbers vary, but it looks like another 12 million people. I'm curious what your thoughts are on what does sensible immigration policy look like today?
Yeah, thank you. So first off, the most immediate need that we have to address is the DACA issue. This president has put, in my opinion, an artificial deadline to March 5th that right now he's playing around with between 600,000 and 1.2 million lives of people who are real strong members of our community who don't know any other country, and we need to find a solution to that right now. And I want to make sure that the people who qualify under current DACA have an ability to stay in this country, aren't at risk of being torn apart, and are able to keep our communities together that way. Then beyond that, then the next thing that this president just did was the TPS with a variety of, or ending TPS with a variety of countries, the most recent being El Salvador, which affects 200,000 people, and more people in this county than any other county in the United States. And I think we need to get a solution to that. And then we have 10 million people beyond that, who right now are trying to kind of in a legal limbo. And I think we need to get a permanent solution that has a sensible pathway to citizenship for people who, if they qualify and satisfy certain requirements along the way, they are able to get either legal green card status or legal citizenship eventually. But also that, of course, protects our borders and creates clear lines for how people can go through that process. Because the real problem right now, you have a lot of people who say, why don't this group of people just get in line and do things the right way? Well, the fact of the matter is, for a whole lot of people, there just isn't a line. There isn't a process because we have such a convoluted, broken system. And I got a lot of experience with this when I was clerking on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, and we dealt with so many immigration cases, and I just really saw how completely broken that system is. So let's fix that, let's make it clear, let's have clear pathways and clear lines so people can do it in a proper way, and then there's less of an incentive to do it in other ways.
That will be for the education.
Yeah.
The no child left behind doesn't work. And I mean, I speak from two countries with problems against France and America. And instead that to find some pleasure to put up everybody, we get down most of the people to have a label here instead of there. And I know that because I have helped people, young children, to go to a high school here. And the no child left behind doesn't work at all. So it should be nice, eventually for the children who do not speak English and who come here, that they should be helped. If we accept them, we have to do something for them. So it should be nice to have a program to elevate them at a level of comprehension of the language and the reading and writing, instead that to put everybody down. And I don't know how to do that. I know how to do it, but I'm not going to tell you.
Well, thank you for keeping it secret. When I'm in office after the election, I hope you don't keep it secret. I hope you'll come to one of the many town halls we'll have. I hope you'll come to the office and talk to me and my staff and work together and give solutions, because...
I will write to you.
Good, thank you. Look, my parents were both public school teachers. Lisa and I are both products of public schools our entire lives. Everything I have is because I was lucky enough to go to good public schools that gave me an opportunity to get ahead. And it makes me sick that so many kids today don't get that same chance. And I think it's a real problem. And it's one of the things that frustrates me so much about this most recent tax bill. And it's just a complete, I just think a complete wrong-headed set of priorities that we're having in the country when they say, you know, when people talk to you about, oh, we don't have the resources, we can't afford it or whatnot, they just gave away $1.5 trillion. That's what Steve Knight and his enablers and Trump's enablers in Congress just gave away $1.5 trillion. And what they said is it's better to give that $1.5 trillion to big banks and big corporations instead of investing in our education system. Instead of, for one time in its entire existence, fully funding Title I, making sure that special education students have the resources they need, lowering class sizes, training teachers. To me, that's a much more important priority than making sure banks have a bigger bottom line to pay their CEOs a bigger bonus. And so I want to make sure we're shifting our priorities. There's nothing more important than our educational system. Our children truly are our future. They're the ones who are going to make sure that we're all taken care of as we get older. And it's a real short-sighted turn of events to hope that you can bump the stock market for another quarter because you just gave a windfall while letting our schools and our healthcare and so many other things go down the drain. So I just think we need to shift those priorities, and education is one of the most important things I think that we could be working on.
Hi, I'm Linda Cook, and I'd like to know what you would do, what kind of a structure you would put together to take care of DACA.
Yeah, well, we're basically right now, and thank you for the question. I mean, we have a structure in the DACA program that was set forth by President Obama. It simply was an executive order. But we can turn that into a legislative piece of work. And right now there's a Clean Dream Act. It's drafted. It's available. It has bipartisan support. It has the votes to pass. Speaker Ryan just needs to put it up for a vote. And he won't. And he's holding hostage. So I don't need to be too creative and go to the drawing board to create a system. We've got the Clean Dream Act right now. We've got the support for it right now. Now, Steve Knight doesn't support it, but we've got it there. We just need Speaker Ryan or some other leaders with a backbone in Congress to put it up for a vote and make sure we're not tearing our communities apart.
It seems to me that one of the biggest issues with getting things done in this country is actually what you just said, voting. How what is your stance on getting people registered and getting people actually out to vote? Because, you know, we talk about the millions of people that vote, but it's a tiny, tiny little proportion compared to those who don't.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really big issue. We need to have people get out, and whatever side they vote for, they need to vote. What are you doing about that?
Yeah, I agree completely. The more people vote, the more engaged people are, the more that we start recognizing that we, the people, own this democracy, then the less likely it is that the big banks and corporations can keep buying our democracy. And so I take that very, very seriously in this campaign. One thing I'm really trying to do is boost millennial turnout and the 18-year-olds to vote in their first election. And so I just recently, I went to Valencia High School and I did 4.5 hours of a town hall. So every single government class at the school came in for 35 minutes at a time to ask me any questions they wanted. Just one right after the other, after the other, after the other. So in the course of the day, I talked about 500 17 and 18-year-olds about whatever questions matter to them, to say, look, right now you might not be engaged in the democracy and politics because you think they're just talking about Social Security that doesn't apply to you or other things. Let's talk about what matters to you. Let's explain why it's important. And that was wonderful. And a couple of weeks before that, I went to a great voter registration drive done at one of the local high schools, where now in California, you can get registered when you're 16 or 17. You can pre-register. So when you turn 18, you're automatically ready to vote. And so we went there, and in one morning, we registered 800 16 and 17-year-olds who will then be ready to vote as soon as they turn 18. And I spoke at this event, and we had some other community leaders who were there, some of them who are here today, Andy Taban, who was there. And I spoke to these kids and said, look, it's easy to think your vote doesn't matter. It's easy to think that you can't make a difference. And at the time, I talked about how, in the year 2000, the presidential election, the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, that vote came down to 512 people in Florida. And we registered more people on that one day at that one high school that could have changed the presidential election. Now you get an even better example because of what just happened in Virginia, in that House of Delegates race where it ended in an exact tie and they had to pull a name out of a film canister. And so when you really talk to people about your vote can make a heck of a difference, and especially in this congressional district, which is one of the closest districts in the country. And so your vote really can matter. So we started early with our field game of registering new voters. We got 2 offices opened up already, and we've had more than 1,000 people sign up to volunteer. Because there's so much energy and enthusiasm right now, and we're going out and making phone calls to recruit more volunteers. We're knocking on doors and getting people to sign pledge cards that they're going to vote in 2018, because frequently people will maybe vote in a presidential, but they won't vote in a midterm. So we go talk to them now and we get them to sign a pledge card. Yes, I'm going to vote in 2018. Well, we're going to mail that pledge card back to them on October 1st, October 15th, and November 1st. And they're going to say, oh yeah, I committed to vote. And there's pretty good research that boosts turnout. And so we're just going out and trying to talk to as many people as possible. I go to, I was at Green Valley a couple of weeks ago. Lisa and I went there, and a woman who was there said, I've lived here for 37 years and I've never seen any candidate for any office come here. But I'm going there to talk to people, and I'm going to Lake Los Angeles, and I'm going to Porter Ranch and Simi Valley, because I want people to know we're in this together. And the only way that we're going to get back the country, I think we should be and that we deserve, is if we take it and we own it and we vote and hold our representatives accountable and hold me accountable when I'm in office, so we keep working together and we keep building the community we should have.
You mentioned the dysfunction in Washington. How do we go about even thinking about changing the dysfunction and the paralyzation there?
Yeah, it's completely and totally broken. The best thing I think you can do, and maybe I'm a little biased, but I think you got to throw the bad people out. It's not too hard to see what's happening. It's not too hard to see people who are roadblocks and impediments to getting solutions that'll work for our community. And so when there are people who are taking vote after vote against our community, who are literally giving a tax break to a billionaire when we don't have a single one in our congressional district, who are, refusing to support common sense, immigration reform that will keep our communities together when they won't even put it up for a vote, or when they tell us one thing here and vote another way there, well then don't vote for them. They don't deserve your vote. And if enough people around this country recognize that elected officials work for the people, and that we can hold them accountable, that we can make sure they fulfill their promises, then we're going to get a better crop of people in office. And then we're going to be able to start getting solutions that might actually work. And so I think we need to change the campaign finance system. I think there are procedural rules you can change, but none of that is going to happen until the bad folks are gone. And so that's what we need to do. We got 10 months until the next election, and we need to make sure that we get some of those roadblocks out of office, and then maybe we can start actually having people who will represent the community.
State your name.
Anyway, we just wanted to ask one of our questions about local issues. And here in Santa Clarita, we've had to deal with the possibility of a CMEX mine, the CMEX mine. And it comes with discussions about BLM overreach and so on and so forth. So as an elected official, what do you think you could do to help us with the CMEX situation and with other situations where the BLM kind of goes bananas on us?
Well, thank you. You know, the CMEX situation is, I think, one of the most important issues in this community for sure, but the Congressional District as a whole. It's a fast-moving situation right now. We just had a lawsuit filed by CMEX a couple weeks ago, right after the city of Santa Clarita had come out with another attempt at an annexation. I've actually been talking to Andy Freed about going through some of these documents and trying to find out what the best solution is from that and what's happening. But I think we need a legislative solution. I think that we can't rely on BLM, we can't rely on a designation of a national monument. I think we need a legislative solution to make sure that this mine doesn't open in this community. I think it would be environmentally catastrophic. I think it would be awful for traffic. And I'm committed to, when I'm in office, working with all the local officials who've been fighting this battle for decades, literally decades, and also trying to do a much better job in Washington than what our current representative is doing in terms of getting broad, far-reaching support so we can get a bill through Congress and actually get that permanent solution to let this community relax a little bit and feel secure that it's not going to be opening on our watch.
The Emoluments Clause is part of the Constitution, but it's not self-enforcing. And any citizen who wants to raise a claim under the Emoluments Clause faces a steep hill to climb in terms of standing.
No.
And if you don't have standing, the case is dismissed and the court never gets a chance to reach the merits. So what about federal legislation establishing ethical standards applicable to the president, prohibiting conflicts of interest, and requiring that the president and his or her immediate family put all of their assets into a blind trust during his term of office, and providing for standing and providing for injunctive relief if the court finds for the plaintiff?
Yeah. I agree with you on the Emoluments Clause, and I think what I know of what's happening, it certainly seems like it's being violated in my understanding of it. There are some interesting lawsuits going forward right now from some hotels who have a better argument about having standing than just as an individual person, who are actually suffering directly from business going to a Trump hotel that was going to theirs. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the court, but frankly, I think ultimately if it ever got to the Supreme Court, they'd say this is a political question, and they're not going to rule on it. I don't know what the exact answer is. To me, it's just shocking that we have to even be discussing legislation for the President of the United States not to have a conflict of interest. That we even need to discuss that is kind of shocking to me, and it's a sad state of the situation. So I certainly think there are different proposals that can make sure we don't ever deal with this again. It's very sad that we're even in this situation to begin with, but I'd love to find a solution. I'd love to make sure that we don't have people in office, and not just the president, but I mean, right now you have other rules that rely to Congress and other officials, but people can't go into an elected position, what's supposed to be the public service, and use it for their own personal gain. That's why we have so many problems in Washington. That's why it's so dysfunctional. That's why people in communities are being left behind, because so many people are looking out for themselves, their big donors, and their friends, and not our communities. And we need to have clear guidelines in place to prohibit that and get us back to actually serving the public and not the other way around.
Brett Haddock, board member of the King Country Advisory Committee, but I'm here in my own accord. Wanted to ask you about the opioid crisis that is nationwide. Santa Clarita and the 25th District has not been immune to it by any means, so wanted to see what your thoughts are on how we can help reduce the problem going forward and help get people treatment that they need now.
Yeah, it's a horrible tragedy right now. It's undoubtedly an epidemic. It's not getting the treatment or the resources and the focus that it deserves. And it goes back to those priorities and making sure that we are providing the resources and opportunities necessary for people to get the treatment they deserve. I personally, when it comes to healthcare, support Medicare for all. I think we have this system that is really good. It has high favorability ratings. It's efficient. It keeps costs down. It applies to everybody. And as part of that Medicare for All system, I want to make sure that there's substance abuse treatment, that we're allowing for creative solutions. There are a lot of good places here in the Santa Clarita Valley with things like horse therapy, where you take people who are dealing with substance abuse and they go out and they train and take care of horses, and it's been shown to be very successful. Well, I want to make sure we have a healthcare system that can allow for that can get people the care they need, and not just kick people off their insurance, leave them to fend for themselves. And actually just put money into this, into education, into making sure that, education both of people, but also of doctors, so they don't overprescribe, because a lot of it can be traced to that. There are things and interesting studies out there in terms of how a federal marijuana legalization for medicinal purposes, at the very least, would help cut down on the opioid crisis. So there are a lot of different solutions that we could start working on if we really put a focus on it and recognize that this is a tragedy that's affecting far too many families in our community and every other community across the country, and need to start looking into it more.
Next time I'll ask a hard question.
Senator, can I ask about Oreo?
Yeah, what's your stance on Oreos?
I mean, as a person whose last name is Caforio, I have a very strong stand on Oreos. And so when you go into that voting booth in June and November, just think of your favorite cookie, the Oreo, and vote for me, Bryan Caforio. All right, thank you, everybody.
I did it too.
Thanks, Al.